Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Hello. We're going to start today's event. Oh, there we go. Got you. All right. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Wherever you're joining us from around the world, welcome and thank you for being here. My name is Lucy Gildeen, and I'm the co-chair of the We Will Women's Empowerment Associate Resource Group at Terumo Blood and Cell Technologies alongside Crystal Petty. On behalf of We Will, we're delighted to welcome you to today's International Women's Day conversation. Although International Women's Day was officially recognized on March 8th, we're intentionally gathering today to reflect, extend the conversation, and most importantly, turn inspiration into action. This year marks 115 years of International Women's Day. More than a century of progress, persistence, and possibility. And in 2026, the global theme, Give to Gain, reminds us of something powerful. When we invest in women through time, resources, visibility, and opportunity, we don't lose. We gain stronger organizations, healthier communities, and better outcomes for everyone.
We're especially honored to be joined today by an exceptional group of leaders. Today's conversation will be moderated by our President and CEO, Antoinette Gawin.
We got to warm up the crowd.
Whose leadership at Terumo Blood and Cell Technologies reflects the very spirit of this theme. Purpose-driven, people-oriented, and grounded in the belief that progress is a shared responsibility. Antoinette will be joined by three outstanding women CEOs who are shaping the future of our healthcare. Patti White, CEO of Hemex Health, Cate Spears, CEO and founder of CGT Global, and Kelly Brough, President and CEO at Fitzsimons Innovation. We're thrilled to have you all with us today. Before we begin, a few quick notes. Please feel free to submit questions in the chat. At any point during the conversation, we'll reserve the time toward the end for Q&A and a shared reflection. And with that, it's my pleasure to turn things over to Antoinette to kick things off today. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. And let's give a hand for Lucy and Crystal for organizing all of this. There's a lot of work that goes into this. So first, I'd like to get the important things out of the way. The boots are from Fluvog on Larimer Street, the first ones I own, but yes, I felt like they embody a spirit we'd like to convey here. And I'd like to start by having each person just talk a little bit about your company, what you're doing, and how our paths crossed. So if you want to start, Patti.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Hello, everybody. I'm happy to be here, and it'll be exciting to have this dialogue with this group. And a little bit about my background. So I'm the CEO and co-founder of Hemex Health, but my background with technology really starts when I saw my first personal computer when it just came out. And so my passion has really been for seeing how you could take technology and change people's everyday life. That's why I entered into the PC business, and I joined Hewlett-Packard, where I started. Then I went on within HP to cardiology, where we're also making a difference with technology. And then since then, I've done several startups with the same theme, which is take technology, try to have it be designed in a way that it can reach people, and even reach people that don't have the same buying power that other people do. So we started actually Hemex Health, my current company and startup, in 2016. And really our idea there was really around doing diagnostics in a way they could reach more people. And we really started focusing on sickle cell disease. We knew we were going to work on blood disorders. But what we saw in sickle cell disease is here was a disease where 500,000 children are born every year. 400,000 of them are born in places where they don't have a way to test whether they even have the disease. So most of those children will die by the time they're 5. So if we had to pick a problem, we said, let's pick a problem and let's figure out a way to develop a product that can reach those people, where it can go to Africa, be used by someone who's not very skilled, where maybe there's no physician around, be able to have a cost structure. So we build things in India to be able to make them affordable. And we launched our first version of that product in 2021. I'm thrilled to say that we've done almost 4 million tests. We know that could probably save the lives of 40,000 children. So huge impact. Oh, and then how do I got to know Terumo? Well, Terumo also works in sickle cell. We kind of run into each other in Africa. But I got to know Antoinette through another CEO, a woman CEO who introduced us also directly.
Yeah, so it's been a great journey. And part of what is inspiring about Patti's journey is taking the principles and turning it into product design and making it so real. And if you haven't seen the Gazelle device, I would look it up. It's really small, and they've made it smaller. We were in Kenya together explaining to some people at a dinner what the device does. And I said, I wish I had one. And Patti pulled one out of her purse. Here. And so we ended up doing a demo at the end of the table, right, with the American Embassy. So, but that passion is part of what is exciting to have that kind of perspective, frankly, with our group today. So I'll turn it to Kelly then.
This is also why it's good to have women founders. We have all of it in our purse.
Yeah.
Whatever you need.
I love that.
I love that. I'm Kelly Brough. I run Fitzsimons Innovation Community, and I've only been doing this in this role for just over a year. But the same thing that attracted me to this opportunity is what has driven every decision in my career and my life. And you'll see, I can't hold a job. I've had a lot of them. But it's really, I think, what happens when we figure out how the public, private, and nonprofit sectors really work together, we make way more progress on the biggest issues that are facing our communities. And so this role was attractive to me because I felt like those three sectors can work better on my campus. And what we do there is I operate just over 400,000 square feet of lab space. Early stage startups are who come to work with us. We keep that space very inexpensive so they can have the kind of innovations that save lives. And by making sure we're cooperating with our local government, our county, our state, our feds, we can go much further and help those companies be really successful. How I was introduced to Antoinette is the former CEO was on our board. And I'm sure any minute Antoinette is going to join our board. That's my whole, I just thought I'd publicly pressure her.
No pressure, no pressure.
He was on the hiring committee that hired me. And the first thing he said is, after he had never met me, as he got to know me from the interview, he said, you have to meet the CEO of Terumo because you are so similar in your style. And I do love her style. And I'm thrilled to be here. So thanks.
We like each other's jokes. That helps.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, thank you. And you, as Kelly talks, we use the word ecosystem often. What does that mean? She's bringing together that ecosystem for the company itself. The ecosystem changes. And when you think of all those stakeholders along the way, that's part of the power of having this mix. And so I'll turn it to Cate.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Cate Spears. I'm the CEO for CGT Global, and lovely to be here with all of you today. Thank you for asking me. So I founded and started my company in 2010. We were chatting about this earlier this morning. That I was 31 years old when I started it. I just aged myself, didn't I? But ultimately, I started out of a space of a passion to really help accelerate medical research. And how were we going to do that differently than somebody else? We weren't going to take on our own projects of medical research, but we were going to help funnel and accelerate others. So a great example is, I used to work in healthcare and was working in the emergency room. And ultimately, we had patients that were coming in that were dying of diseases. And the transplant banks would always collect from healthy patients, but not diseased. And I was really frustrated by this. Why wouldn't we, if somebody was a donor, also collect from diseased patients to help funnel research? It seems logical sitting here with you today, but at the time it really wasn't. So it started my company, and where we really focused was on R&D advancements for these therapies. Over the last 16 years, though, it has evolved to be able to help with clinical trials, phase 1 through 3, and then also the commercialization of some of these products that are coming to market, like cell and gene therapies. And so we've been really blessed to be a part of some incredible work of other companies and help really get them to market in a way that impacts patients. I think that's my greatest passion is helping that energy get to the world. And then I think on sort of the patient first side of things, I am extremely frustrated at times when I watch incredible therapies come to market and yet patients can't access them. And I would say that leans right into, this of how even I met Antoinette, but I think some of the alignment we have with Terumo is that they're creating these incredible devices and incredible pathways for patients. And I think we're focused on sort of that logistics rail of actually that last mile to patients. And how do we improve that? How do we create accessibility differently for these therapies? And so, in a nutshell, and I got a chance to meet Antoinette on her very first day. It was completely by accident. I was here meeting with some of the team upstairs, and more people were sort of issuing into the room. And all of a sudden, they're like, "Well, and our new CEO is going to come into the room and sit and listen to you." So that was her first day, and I get to her first real in that role. Yeah. Because obviously you've been here for a minute, but it was really exciting, and I feel like you're an incredible visionary. And I said to her before, just to say this to hold us all accountable, that I said Antoinette is, I think, an incredible leader when it comes to leaning into vulnerability. And I said my greatest fear up here today is she's going to make us lean into vulnerability. So just throwing it out there. Everybody's been warned.
And so on that note, Kate, I think you got a sense these people are going to hold me accountable no matter what.
Yeah.
But I want to pick up on a theme because I do know a bit of your personal journey. You're a young woman, you want to start this company, and you had a lot of people who said no. What gave you the courage to jump into that and face into that?
Yeah, I had so many people that said no, and I think that so many people that said it just wouldn't be accomplishable. I hear that more than I hear, this is a great thing, move forward. So I think so much of this has stemmed from, I'm someone who doesn't take no well. My wife would tell you that. But I also feel that I knew that it needed to happen. I knew that change needed to be part of the equation. That if patient, I always say like my highest North Star is the patient, but actually beyond that is to reduce suffering. So when I see that patients are suffering without getting access to treatments, without these therapies reaching them, I think there has to be a different way to do this. And I don't care when someone says, well, it's just not possible, it's not doable. It's like, well, let's think differently about it. Let's do this differently. I think as a woman, early on as we became just like sort of took off like a rocket ship, I had a lot of people say, investors would come and say, when are you going to hire someone to run your company? And I was just like, well, isn't that why you're talking to me? I mean, aren't you interested because of how I'm running my company, right? And I think, especially as a young woman, right, just completely can be dismissive in that way. And so yeah, it was definitely has been an upward climb.
Yeah. I think when I first became an executive at GE, I was very young, and people used to always ask about being young and being a woman, and I don't get that young part anymore, so that makes you reflect differently. I'm like, when are they going to ask the young part? But so Patti, you've also gone through multiple startups, and you came from this big company. What spurred you to go out on your own, and what gave you the impetus and the focus?
For me, a lot of it was the fact that we felt like we could identify a problem that was out there that nobody was solving. And if you really, as the CEO especially, you're out there talking to users, really understanding the issues, that gives you confidence to, even though you hear no all the time, this is real, and it's a great opportunity. It may not be the kind of thing a big company is going to go after. You can be very quick and adept in moving around when you're a small company, and we wanted to do that. We wanted to fulfill the big need that we saw that was out there, which with the first company, again, it was a medical device, but it was a medical device that could be affordable for many places and could be used. And it was very successful. So we did prove that it worked. Yeah. But I heard a lot of no's. You still hear 90% no. That's part of your job as an entrepreneur.
And how do you handle that when you get the no's? How do you say, okay, I need more than a stiff shot of espresso to keep going today?
Really, you just have to expect that person's not the right person for you. And you've got to figure out why were they not right. let me go somewhere else where there might be that match. And or you see, for example, with Terumo, they cared about the same things that we cared about.
Yeah.
So therefore, they would be a good partner to us.
Yeah. So we talk a lot here about how do we collectively use our superpowers. And Patti, I'll ask you to start, because there's some superpowers that you have that you brought to all of these different ventures. How would you characterize your superpower?
I think my superpower is really user empathy, really going out and seeing what people need, just watching them, figure out how do you do a product that meets the needs better than the competition. So that's something that I really enjoy doing. It doesn't matter that I'm the CEO. I still want to be out there, seeing what's going on, seeing the feedback on our current product, and really just listening to them. Not asking them, what's the solution, but asking them, what's the problem? What can you not do today? What makes you feel frustrated at the end of the day when you go home? So I feel like as a CEO, I'm still that person out there that wants to be out with customers. I don't see how, as a CEO, you can do that if you don't mix both of those together.
Yeah. See a need, fill a need. Right? Kelly, and share some of your journey. We had an interesting conversation about how you developed some of your superpowers.
I love this question, and it is like Brene Brown. So you have time to prepare for what's coming. For me, my superpower came from probably the weakness that the school system identified in me. So I'm dyslexic. I got very lucky that in third grade, a critical moment when you transition from being taught to read to needing to read to learn, I had a teacher who figured out I was faking reading and actually taught me to read. So I can read.
Woo! All right.
Yeah.
That's my superpower.
Let's set that bar high.
But the benefit of not being a super speedy reader, it's a little hard for me. I have to take a few extra notes to make sure I'm capturing what's coming out of that reading. I knew this wasn't ever going to be my strength. And what you naturally do is develop a whole bunch of other things to compensate for that weakness. And some of the things I did, how many of you in high school, when you're asked, would you like to give a written report or a, speech? Everybody was like, I'll do the written report. I was like, I'll do the speech.
Yeah.
And it ended up developing public speaking skills that have served me extremely well. The second thing that happened for me is because it is to try to comprehend what I was reading, I got really good at getting to the essence of an issue. So that, often when people present or you read something, there's a lot of distractions in it. And I'll be the one who says, there's only 3 things that matter in what you just said. I try to say it nicer than that. In your 45-minute speech, there were 3 things. And that's the other superpower I think I developed because of my weakness. And now I'm going to pitch a book because every time I share this story, I find out there's people in the world who are dyslexic and struggling to find their path. There's a book called David and Goliath. It's written by Malcolm Gladwell. It is a powerful book about why when you're dyslexic, you often are much more successful in life. And so for young people to read this book and realize when I get out of school, life is going to be amazing.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And maybe and I guess before, talk a little bit about how you channeled that into public service.
Yeah. You mean that I'm a loser when I ran for office? I channeled it, I would say, in every position I have had, it has been incredibly valuable for me. And one of the things I have done in my life is, because I'm not a great writer and I never really will be, the first thing I hire is a great communications team. And the first thing I tell them is, you're really good at that. I'm really good at this. And as a team, we are going to kill it. And our superpowers, when they come together, really will be maximized. And the reason I do that is it shows deep respect for the skill set they bring. It also shows my complete dependence on them. That my superpower is only going to be good if you really are exercising yours. And that's why you're here. And I would say it has built really strong teams with deep respect for each other. And I was joking about my public service. I ran for office. The reason you get me today is I lost.
I would have still come after you.
And that was super, and I'd still be here. And it was a really good experience for me as well to realize the skills I had developed served me well in that experience.
Yeah, but you're a uniter and you know how to connect people and bring those stakeholders together, and that's a powerful skill. So let's turn to Cate a little bit.
Yeah. So, it's interesting just listening to both Patti and Kelly say this too. There's something that I think is a theme that just jumped out at me, and what I'm going to say too is that knowing your weaknesses, and I think being really humble and clear about them. I was just reading Brene Brown's book, Dare to Lead, and it was, it's really interesting of that if we can really understand those gaps in ourselves, then we can really help, like Antoinette says, like find somebody with that opposite superpower to fill in there so that together we're stronger together. And, I often say to my team, and I say as we're looking at interviewing process, I don't want to be the smartest person in the room on X, Y, Z. I want to have those people in those seats so that together we can pull together. I would say that a superpower of mine, I was an impatient child. If my mom was sitting here today, she'd be the one in the room who would really be cheering us on. Is that, but I just, I wanted things to happen rapidly. I wanted things to happen quickly, and I just felt this need and desire for change, like aggressive change. I think that one of my powers is being able to paint a picture and a story of where we're going from a visionary standpoint, and help people see through the obstacles, right? As opposed to just, okay, we want to get here, all I see is obstacles, is that if I can help them from a visionary standpoint, see beyond that and see that, yes, there's going to be those things in front, but how do we get to that place that we're trying to get? I think that I have a good skill at being able to paint that picture and just kind of see beyond the issue.
Yeah. So talk a little bit. I think each of you have different experiences here. But Cate, I think about what you did during COVID to pivot.
Yeah.
And actually build Optia into her systems in a very unique way. But when you have a small team, right? You have a startup environment, you have a government office, you got a scrappy team. How do you manage finding the right skill sets, the resources, and getting people to go when there's just not that many of you?
Yeah. No, it's absolutely the truth. Yeah. When COVID happened, like before it was even called COVID, we were sort of watching what was going on, and we were talking earlier, my sister works in politics. And so I was sort of talking to her about what was happening. And I knew that there wasn't going to be enough resources to support what was happening. We had labs around the United States already. So I thought, if nothing else, how can we be supportive to the community as it needs us? And also the research projects that we had, I knew clinical trials were going to just come to a screeching halt in hospitals. So how is that going to impact those trials? How is it going to impact the patients? And if we could play a role there to make a difference. And so as Antoinette said, I got our team together in a room a lot like this. This is back, by the way, when, on the news, there was a ticker of how many people were dying by the minute, of COVID. So everyone was completely frightened by it. And I said, hey, I think we should bring in the ability to do COVID testing. And I remember it was sort of crickets. It was sort of, I never, it was like, are you bringing the Black Plague into our environment? Like, what's going to happen with this? How is that going to impact us? And I tried to walk people through previous diseases in history, right? How those have, people have had to lean in to create these resources. So to Antoinette's question, we had to become, go to those core principles that we have as a company, one of which is nimbleness, and curiosity is another, but to really lean into, okay, we've never done all of these things before. How are we going to do them? And I think, we ended up taking over for the National Guard in Sacramento. We took over for 300 nursing homes, 45 different hospitals, really just a lot of Indian health tribes, school systems. It was shocking. We did so many things we had never done. And I think what's amazing about that is when you push your team And the people that stayed and grew with that through me, I mean, are with me today in even higher roles within the company, because we learned how to do something that was incredibly hard and impossible to do, that everyone was struggling with. Hospitals couldn't even get access to testing at some point when we were doing this. And we had couriers with duffel bags coming to our doors in lines. And we took over for transplant banks that couldn't get people off of ventilators fast enough. And there was so much urgency and so much pressure. But I think is really, again, reminding people, look, we're doing this for this cause, this purpose. We're going to figure it out. I don't expect anyone here to know what they're doing. We don't on this. But if we just focus on, safety and the patient first, if we focus on not doing any harm, of course, how can we really make a difference? And we made such a massive difference. And it's so fascinating too, Antoinette, because the team members that are with me today, if I were to walk into a room today and say, hey guys, we're going to do something we've never done before, they're like, okay. They're just not stressed about it anymore. Yeah. It's like I sort of broke them in a really good way, right? And they're just like, oh, this is what
now
we do.
They're all flexy.
Yeah, that is like, this is what we do now. We do things that are impossible. So it's really cool what has come out of that too.
Yeah. So Kelly, in your new role, I mean, you see startups at every stage. Share some of your observations about that.
Yeah, I have to just build off of, as I answer the question, the critical point of feeling like you have purpose in what you're doing. And the more you can have your team see the impact and the purpose of that work. So when one of the things we really started to do, I have 9 team members who, we have about 80 companies doing research on our campus that we directly support. And they are doing very complex technical, like these ladies, where I tell them, I'm going to describe what you do, and you're going to be like, that is so not what we do, but it will always be complimentary. I'm never going to understand the technical nature. And what I've really emphasized with our team is we actually don't have to understand the details of what you're doing and why the breakthrough on that gene, how you did it. What I do have to be able to understand is what support do you need to make that happen? And those are things we can easily do. And the other thing we shifted, early in my career, I was always told, would you stay in your lane? Would you stay in your lane? We actually need people to not stay in their lane if we're going to really make this work. And stop being so threatened by somebody, coming a little close to you while we're driving down the highway at 90 miles an hour. It'll be okay. And so we really, with intention, started to say, yeah, you have key duties in your role. I need you to understand these 3 other roles as well, because you're going to have to step into those once in a while. Or you're going to see something that I want you to say something and not just let it keep going along. And so it's just a shift in culture. But I'm going to give you another example very quickly of a previous role. I used to run the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce. The vision statement for the chamber is to drive the economic vitality of the state of Colorado. It's beautiful. Now, if I asked all of you, what the hell does that mean? We would all be like, I don't know. It's good, though. I think it's good. When I got there, we had 60 teammates who did kind of the same look as you. It seems good. I said, what if we changed that to say, we deliver jobs for Coloradans, really good jobs, jobs that change lives, that improve educational outcomes for kids and health outcomes for families. What if I told you that's the business we're in? Now I have 60 employees, highly motivated, because we made it very personal about what they're doing for Coloradans. And I would argue that's economic vitality, just stated in a way that you could get your hands around and have a sense of what you do every day to drive it.
Yeah, that's a great example. In fact, we've had some conversations about, it's easy to use fat words, right? Economic vitality is a fat phrase. It could mean anything to anyone, could show up on a PowerPoint and we'd all nod. But unpacking those things is the important part. And one thing I think you've heard already, everyone here jumped into something they didn't know anything about, but they were curious. They had a sense there's a problem. I can help fix it, but I don't know how. Like, Patti, you jumped into sickle cell disease. And I'd ask you to think about not just what made you think you could fix it, but after coming from a big company and then going to these startups, what are the things that you found different, better, worse? You know, how would you compare and contrast a little bit?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because like I know a lot of you are here at Terumo at a big company. I think one of the advantages of big companies that are divisionalized and have a clear focus, you do connect with the mission, but still you do have the overhead of having to go to meetings, do some things that aren't directly related to your job. And I felt like at HP, several of us felt like we really wanted to be able to move faster. We wanted to be more focused. And that's really how we started our first startup. A group of us left HP to really decide we wanted to go after things where we had control, we could move it ahead, we could do things more quickly. And that's one thing about a startup. I think a lot of times people think startups are disorganized, or you're moving really fast, you're just talking to a lot of people, changing on a dime, or you have some guy that sleeps under the desk and stays there all the time and tells people what to do. In fact, startups have to be very focused because resources are really scarce. You really have to make decisions quickly, and you really have to be able to make sure that you don't get stuck off in an area that's not really true to your mission. At the same time, you have to pivot a lot. Really, it's about making changes. It's about sometimes doing the wrong thing, failing. You have to be able to fail fast and then be able to move forward. So I think people can, there's a lot of things I loved about being part of a larger company, especially one that had the kind of values that HP has, the motivation. But I definitely, in the end, I'm a startup person because I like to see things move and be able to spend 10 hours a day on just what I want to do that the company needs done, not really having to do so much the multitasking you have to do in bigger companies.
Yeah. Well, and I'd also ask you to comment on how do you choose your partners, right? We've been fortunate that we have a great partnership. We're beginning to build and grow, even deepen. But I think it's a relevant question for all of you. How do you know when somebody's going to fit those core values and align with that purpose?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really important question because I will tell you on all the startups I've done, we've always had big partners. I mean, even the first product we did in the first startup, we did a partnership with Welch Allyn. They sold $100 million of that one product for us. Which some big partners can do things that you just can't even begin to do as a startup. You just can't you can't really scale things as well. But what I really look for, and I've learned is three things. I mean, first of all, you really have to look at, do you have the right values? So the reason why you're doing something is the same, because in the end, you need to really be able to really make decisions together. And you don't want somebody who's, I'm going to do it for this reason and you're going to do it for another reason. So you have to agree that the reason why you're in business is very similar. I think the second thing is then have goals specifically about what you want to do together. I love this idea of the BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goal. Have a goal of what you're going to go after together. That will center you because you are going to have a lot of bumps along the way, even if you're with a partner. And then I would say really the third thing is transparency. You really have to look at each other and say, this isn't working. Why did this happen? How can we do it differently? That's really what keeps the partnership going. I've had multiple partners with corporate entities that have lasted more than 10 years. And that does a lot because of those three things.
Yeah.
Really helped align us.
Well, and I think there's also an element, as you described that, of knowing what your secret sauce is and what you can successfully achieve, and how do you leverage that, right? I think the hardest thing for many leaders is to let go of something and trust that it will be done in the right way, right? Kelly, maybe you could share your thoughts on that. I mean, I think of all the different partners you've dealt with through your career.
Yeah, I loved the three key. It made me think of two that I probably, these will be advice for whether it's a personal partner or it's a company partner. That was a little bit of a joke. Yeah, you're funny when you have to tell everybody, laugh now. For me, I think two things I really look for, and this is consistent whether it's a startup or an organization that's been around 150 years. Trust, that we have a deep, trusting relationship, to tell each other hard truths, and confront issues, and set goals, all the pieces that go with it, and then alignment. And I think alignment and trust are harder to figure out than we often give credit for. Can take a little longer. What typically happens in my experience is you're like, well, I made a mistake there because something went wrong. You got unaligned or trust was violated. And to me, while you're trying to discover it on the front end so you get it right, we should do that. It also means you have to be willing to end a relationship when it's not working. And that's the harder part, I think, where we get ourselves in trouble. The minute we know this one we shouldn't be aligned with, to have outs that you have established early on, I think are a good idea for both parties, so you can exit when those two things are not present.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. And Cate, just build from that.
Yeah. Gosh, there's so many good things in that. Yeah, I think, I think about trust, and I oftentimes use the word transparency. Like, I really like transparent conversations. And with partners, I think it's a crucial kind of highest point for us is that if it's something we want to do together, but they're not in a place that they can do that right now, let's just put that out there. I think that goes back to some of the impatience that I have, but it's part of this wanting to move forward in a clear way. And if we don't know if we're not willing to talk about the obstacles, or we're not willing to talk about what isn't working, or we really don't understand this piece and how that plugs in. If we're not willing to have those conversations, it's really hard to work in partnership without transparency. And I think that is true whether or not it's personal or whether or not it's professional. So I think that's really key. The other thing that kind of jumped out to me, I mean, I would agree with everything that Kelly and Patti said, but another, piece in this that I think would jump out to me is are our passions truly aligned? Because it's interesting, being in a space where we're in healthcare and we're in science and medicine is that, most of those areas are pretty risk averse. Mm-hmm. But we're also trying to lean into things that someone might think is risky. And I think to kind of give an example is that if you have a child who's ill and dying of a disease, would you rather that they just tell you, sorry, there's no options, or hey, there might be some options for you. It's gonna move a lot of mountains. It's gonna take a lot of daring and trust to try to do this, but we're willing if you're willing. That's what I'd want to hear as a parent, right? That someone's willing to lean into something that's uncomfortable or an unpaved path. And I think what's hard is that in healthcare, there's oftentimes awards given to people who don't move that many dials or don't, shake that much earth, right? It's like if you just sort of move the ship the same way it's been moving all along, congratulations, and you get a trophy. I feel like I tend to lean to partners who don't function that way. I tend to lean to partnerships when I look at this, we're like, look, we know this is sort of outside the realm, or drawing outside the lines, and we're willing to draw with you. We're willing to pave that road with you. We understand this is an open field, and we're not certain how to put those stones down. Those are the partnerships that I really strive to have, and I think to really grow.
Yeah, I think it's a great observation, and it leads me to kind of another theme, unpacking another fat word, innovation, right? And what you're talking about, Cate, what I've observed is everyone has a different idea of what innovation really is, and whether it is leading edge or bleeding edge, right? Is it risky? Or of course, why not try that? That doesn't, right? We all have different levels of risk, of knowledge. And I'll start with you, Kelly, because you came from this policy background into this innovation hub. How has your view of what innovation really is changed or not?
Yeah, I love this. I think in my first year, I've spent a lot of time asking the question, and I wish I would have asked it earlier in my career, how do you really create an environment that invites innovation? Because I think we really are terrible at it. I think about all the things we do that are a mixed message about, please innovate, be creative. And then it's like, wow, there's a consequence for you got that one wrong. And the truth is, if you really want innovation, you really have to create the systems that say mistakes are actually not just okay, they're recognized as part of this process. You have to provide the protection, I think, for folks emotionally even for them to be able to be okay with failing until you find the path through it. And I just don't think we've really created systems that do that well. So we spend a lot of time trying to figure out what does our community need to reinforce, oh, that failure just got us closer to the next, the solution that we know we're heading toward.
Yeah.
And so I don't have a great answer for how to do it yet, except really trying to look at creativity in a new way. And there's some interesting artists out there. There's a guy, I'm not going to remember his name. He is a very famous songwriter, Johnny Cash. I'm a huge Johnny Cash fan. He wrote a book. I'll look it up before we leave you here. And it's all about that each of us is very creative. Now, that's not what we were taught, right? At a young age, I was told, by the way, you can't sing either, you know? And it's still true. But
Everyone can sing.
everyone can sing, right? I sound amazing. If you guys could get in my head, you would be like, wow, she can sing. His entire book is about each of us brings a really creative act into the workplace. And I think our job in the workplace is to discover and help you discover what is your creativity and contribution. And to me, that's a big part of us unlocking this innovation work that we still need to do.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Even a few years ago, Terumo went through a global process to reframe our core values. And one of the core values, people started out with innovation, but we switched to creativity for that same reason, because people tend to think of innovation as the technology or the bit, not the system or how you work. Right?
I love that.
Yeah. So Patti, talk a little bit, because you said you've had a few startups. Like, how do you think about innovation in that whole aspect of creating an environment?
I think, the one thing that's so critical in innovation is that you really spend enough time on the problem. Because it's so much fun to work on the solution. You know, why not add another wheel to this car, or add some lights and ways to make it fancy? But you really have to know, first of all, what are the most important problems, because you're going to always have to make trade-offs. You're not going to be able to do everything you'd like to do, especially in the first version of your solution. You know, they often talk about this minimum viable product. You do something first that really tries to solve the problem. So I really feel like that's where you see a lot of startups fail. They're trying to tell you about a solution. They haven't really figured out who's the user, what are you solving the most important problem. So I think that's, to me, really critical. And then I think absolutely use creativity. That's great. And some people are better at it than others. You know, I think that sometimes my focus on this, let the R&D guys be really creative, but then I'm like, okay, we have about one more day, and then tomorrow we're going to figure out which thing is going to work. You know, I'm really more about the time and priorities part, and let them be a little bit creative. And see, those things will fail. Most things fail. The number one thing I think about being the leader of a startup is persistence.
Hear, hear.
Yeah. You just have to keep at it, and something fails every week. You just got to keep going. But then you see the glory in that. It comes out on the other side. You got to do things that are.
So could you talk a little about that aspect of, we all get attached to the solution we've come up with, right? Whether we're in a small group, PowerPoints, right? Somebody, I'm like, oh, you're in love with that slide. I can tell. We're not using that, right? We've had this conversation, and everyone starts using the slide. I'm like, did you read the words on there? But how do you? Somebody's come up with this, what they think is this beautiful solution. How do you get people to let go and say, you know, it's like the old phrase was, I can't tell you your baby's ugly, but your baby's a little ugly.
I mean, a lot of that is letting the users decide a little bit. Of course, it's easy for engineers to design something they would love. It's sort of that next bench syndrome. And I used to see that a lot at HP, people who never went out in the field that were designing products for those people. We do a lot of things of mocking things up in very early stages, taking them out, and really listening to what people say, because a lot of times they don't like things for reasons you would never even think about. So it's great to have options. And even if you're doing them in foam models, we carried all those to India, set them up, and had a hematologist talk about what they liked. And we learned so much from that.
Yeah.
it just triggered for me this conversation as you were talking, Patti. There's some research that was done, it was pre-COVID, about the importance of being in person for innovation, creativity, which I know nobody wants to hear today, but the interesting piece about it was it's often, we assign people, you should be creative and innovative, now go do it in your lab, and when you got the answer, come out. And what was discovered in the research is it's often someone like me who knows nothing about what you're actually creating, who will be like, hey, how come you guys did it like that? What if you did it like this? Because you come from a vastly different background. And the only way that happens is when everybody's kind of together and running into each other. And we started to build our offices to force our teams to run into each other outside of the, small team space. And I really would emphasize, right, we're taking for granted in this conversation the being in the room. That is really valuable for creativity, I think, and critical if we're going to find breakthrough new ways of doing things.
Yeah, the power of place. There was work done at Adobe years ago, and they literally moved where the coffee pots were so that the engineers had to walk through the marketers to get to the coffee. And it made a difference, right? Because what do you talk about at the coffee pot? Like, oh, what are you working on? It's random. And part of why we have our open spaces here, we just have to force everybody to go to the middle of the building, right? Yeah, Kate, do you want to?
Yeah. I was gonna, one of the things that I love is when I can find in science something that feels right to me. So kind of find the factual piece that validates the feeling for me. I love it when that happens. And when I first started the company, and there's a device we use, some people never might know it, but it's called a flow cytometer. And it basically, it shoots lasers into cells and then reflects light in this machine, and basically can look at the cells on this matrix level of like purity and viability and structure. So when I was first learning about this machine and technology, I was so fascinated to learn that cells reflect different light, right? And they reflect different energy, and they energize in a way that we can see that under a microscope. We can see that with this technology. And I was so fascinated when I saw about it, because I started thinking about how we sometimes, right, when we're together, we energize off of each other. And scientifically, you can actually look at that, and you can see also that energy and that reflective light that comes from these sort of cells and their activity. So I love it that it sort of ties back to that. I think for me, if you look at the great things in history, and I'm a fan of reading and like looking at history, but honestly, you guys, what my sort of secret power in that is I like to read about things that don't work out as much as I like to read about things that do work out. I learn a lot from reading about that. Businesses that are like Shimano brake parts. We had to study this when I went to the Stanford Graduate School for Executive Leadership. We had to read about all these different companies and different things that they did. Lego, 90 days away from losing all of its cash and going bankrupt, and look at where Lego is today, right? So you see these archival businesses that have been around forever to a Steve Jobs creating the iPod. People thought he was nuts. I mean, they just literally thought no one is going to want to listen to music and carry it around. And today we just take that technology completely for granted. So I think sometimes when I think about innovation, when I think about creativity, I think it does take us looking at the problem, takes us looking at the gaps, but it takes us collectively being willing to push on all those levers that say, it can't be done, no one will want it, how would this go? I can't possibly imagine X. But if we look at some of the best technology that's been created in our lifetimes, it's people that have said those things.
Yeah. So I'd like you each to think a little bit about, we just talked about the power of place and space and being together in that environment. How do you create that environment when we are working remotely and we're in different parts of the world and time zones? Just give us, I'll start with you, Kate, because I know you just flew in from Hawaii.
Yeah.
Hardship duty.
Yeah, that's it.
House.
Yeah. No, I think one of the things, is obviously we focus now a lot like on being on camera, being and, visually present with the people we're on calls with. But, I think this world of sort of Slack and Teams and channels has also taken a whole energy of its own. It's almost its own monster at times. But, I watch our team, like if I need a pick-me-up, we have like this general channel where we do this communication, and I watch the team talking with each other, cheering each other on, complimenting each other on something. And it may not have anything to do with work. It might be something like a marathon they just accomplished, a mountain they just climbed, something that's going on. But I watch that almost like watching around the coffee pot.
Yeah.
Right. And it's honestly, it's like, I don't know if half the people in my company know that I do this, but I will just like log on and read that channel and just be like, this is so great to just watch them participate in a way of bringing each other up and supporting each other at times of need or a family death or something that's gone on. I think that we try to encourage that level of engagement, even in a remote setting.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the times of getting people together, it's hard, especially when we have these clinics and nurses are there working, and I can't be like, everybody stop work today and we're all going to, get together. It's really hard when you want to do that.
Yeah.
But you actually have those impacts that those people are in critical roles too. So yeah, I think that's how we do it.
Like it's a new normal.
Yeah.
Any thoughts, Kelly?
I don't know. I think, we like the getting to know your team at a very personal level has such value, not just because we're nice and human, but because what it really says is, I see you belong here. This is space for you. I care about you. So when you get through whatever the challenge is or the success you've had, I feel like you're even more present than in the work. And I think we've undervalued that for a very, very long time as, well, you're women, so you're really nice at making people feel good about being at work. But there really is a value. You're building a culture of people who are choosing that place because you're recognizing. Do you remember, you're all too young. I'm really old. And when I started work.
Careful, sister. That's a relative.
Everybody said, you need to separate your work life from your personal life.
Yeah.
And I'll just say, I hope we're all calling that out as the most ridiculous notion, that these are two lives we're living. They cross over all the time. We have to impact one of those because of the other all the time. And I feel like what you've just described is a recognition of that. And I think technology means we recognize it and live it in different ways, but still just as important.
Yeah. Seeing people at all levels, right?
Yeah.
We talk often, you never know what the backstory is, right? You don't know what happened at home that morning, or we've all got different elements of that. So Patti, talk a little bit, because you've had such diverse experiences with your teams.
I was thinking as you guys were talking, and because we have an unusual situation because about half our people are in India, other half are in the U.S. We sell our product in 40 countries right now. We have really 1.5 people that are responsible for 38 of those countries. So there's a lot that happens every day, 24 hours a day. You wake up in the morning, oh, great, I've got 50 emails, So it's a challenging to be in a global environment. I don't know that we've figured it out at all. I think we do a lot of late night meetings and early morning meetings so we can be together. And the one thing that I try to do as a CEO is, let's say, if you work here at Hemex, you should be able to write a book about the company. So you should know enough about what's going on that you could write a chapter. I mean, your chapter may look a little different than this other person's, but you should do that. So for example, we share our slides from our board meeting. We do a big conference call, invite every employee. We talk about what happened at that meeting. We do a lot of sharing successes. We explore a lot of information that comes from our KOLs that are out in the field working. So we really try to take advantage of all the social media things that we do that really help us communicate. But it's hard.
Yeah.
You can't be at every place.
So that leads to another, one of my favorite fat words, balance. So what's one piece of advice that each of you would give the people listening in on how do you stay centered and keep yourself balanced, whatever that means to you? So Patti, I'll start.
I'm the wrong person to be asking that question. mean, I think the one thing that helps me is you do have to take care of yourself physically. You do have to decide what do you need to make it through each day. So I know for me, I need to exercise. I need to get on the Peloton or do that. So I have to make time for that. And so you may have to do that. Maybe I do that at 4 to 5 o'clock in the afternoon because nobody's awake in India yet, because I know in the evening I'll be on the phone with them. But you do have to try to find your own centering, which I find is different with different people.
Yeah.
I wish there were one easy answer.
Yeah. Kelly?
It's also, it's not like, okay, I found it. Whew,
Yeah.
that's done. Because no sooner did you feel like you discovered it than something went wrong in one of your worlds, and you're like, never mind. I think for me, I'll give just a concrete example. Travel, physical activity is really big in my life. So I make time for both. But how I do it is very unique to me, and I have to make this really clear to my team. So when I travel, if I'm out of reach, like don't have cell service, then I'm out of reach. But otherwise, I'm going to check my emails an hour every day. I do that because it's pure hell when you come back to work if I haven't. And I would prefer to have an hour during my vacation to just sort stuff out and then come back to work after 2 weeks off. I tell my team, that may not be the answer for you. You may need to fully disconnect to make it work better for you, and that's okay. To me, that's the conversation we have to have, is help each of us discover. And then there's stages in my life. When my kids were young, it was way harder than them being now generally law-abiding adults. And I feel like that was really, really hard. And I needed a lot more grace during that time. And I think that's the other piece. We have to just be really clear with our teams. We're prepared to give you that. Like, that is part of being here and working. And
Yeah. And I think, it's, I know I'm amongst friends when I say this, is that we can be really self-critical of being, and I think actually I'm my harshest critic when I feel out of balance. Because then I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm just completely, I had this great exercise routine and then it went to hell because this thing happened, and I just get really hard on myself. But I think Kelly said it well, this entrepreneurial couple I'm good friends with, that they're much further along in their lives than I am. But, they talk about the seasons of life. And I think that actually really helps give me permission to remind myself that, just like seasons here, like we wish it was snowing more and it's the winter and, and all of this different stuff. Like sometimes it's not what we wish it was going to be, but it's fill in the blank, right? It's a family member that's ill. It's a project at work that needs you to work through the weekend and to be up at 5 a.m. taking calls or whatever is happening. And if I can be sort of just easier on myself as a starting point, right? Mm-hmm. It allows me to not only be easier with others, but also remind myself that balance is adjusting.
Yeah.
If a scale gets really heavy on one side, right, I could adjust it by then moving a workout routine to the evening, or I can adjust it by taking some time off because I've really put in this time. It's like, it's in constant flux. Yeah. But my mind tells me, just like we kind of were raised and stuff, is that it's this perfect balance. And if you always put the exact number of plates on each side, you'll be in balance.
Yeah.
It's like, no, for me, I think I've come to really like trying to understand that this is, it's a living thing.
Yeah.
It's movement.
Yeah.
And I have to pay attention to that. And it's an individual balance. The way I balance might be entirely different than you, Antoinette. And it's like, so, okay, I can't just compare myself.
Right.
And run around with a comparison. I have to look within to say, what is my core balance that I need to find in this?
Yeah. Well, and I think there's a theme here. We all set our own standards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think of my early career. If you asked me how I felt, I would say guilty. Guilty because there's still work that I'm not there to do, and I'm guilty because I'm not home enough. I was raised Catholic too, so all that feeds in. But I realized people didn't see that. They promoted me. I was just like, oh, I felt guilty all the time. And you have to unwind some of those and think about why and really choose your own path. Mm-hmm. I think that's a big part of it. So we have I'm going to ask just a few more questions before we turn it over to open questions, because that's probably the more interesting part. But I really, the theme for International Women's Day is give to gain. And each of you I know has had people who gave you advice or have influenced your career journey, just your life's journey along the way. So I'll start with you, Patti, if you could just talk a little bit about a moment, an opportunity, something that influenced your shift, and how you think about that as a leader today.
Yeah, but it's a very interesting question. I think, Antoinette, when I got that question, when I started reading, I thought about something I hadn't thought about for 20 years, more than 20 years, about how someone really gave me an opportunity that changed my life completely. So it makes me almost cry to think about it, because it was so amazing. And I kind of grew up in a fairly narrow family, so I didn't have a lot of experience, didn't know I had as many opportunities as I do now, or as my kids do now. And it really was my first job out of college. I was working for a trading company, aerospace trading company, and because I really wanted to do international things even then. And it was one day the CEO came to me after I'd been there about a year and a half, and he said, I really see you have something that nobody else has that I rarely see. He goes, something I call business moxie. I had no idea what he meant, but he just said, your judgment, your ability to think of business. And he said, I want to take you out of your job as a buyer and have you be on our operations committee that runs the company. I want you to do special projects for me. And, that was just an amazing opportunity. It came out of nowhere. I didn't feel like I did anything to earn that. And I think for me, what that did, it changed my life. I then, a year later, applied to all the top business schools. I all of a sudden believed that I was worthy of this. Did a good job in being in the operations committee, and got a lot of confidence through that. And so I think the whole idea of maybe giving people a chance when it hasn't already been fully earned, but you just want to give them a possibility to do something new that maybe they wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. I mean, and I try to do that. We'll see somebody and think, wow, they have something amazing about that. About a third or fourth employee, we hired somebody right out of school just because he was the most energetic, say, I'll do anything. Give me anything to do. I'll build those chairs. I'll do that furniture. I said, okay, I guess we will hire you. So he is now our senior director of R&D. So, over the 10 years, he has really grown from building chairs to being very senior.
Yeah.
So I think look, I really want to always continue to look for that chance to give somebody who they haven't fully proven themselves, but give them a chance.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I have.
It's fantastic. Kelly?
That's great. Like you, I was starting to think really early in my career, but I had something happen in middle of my career that really changed my trajectory. And so I want to share it because it was very unique. So I had been the chief of staff to the mayor of Denver. I applied to be the head of the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce. I got the job. I was the first woman in its 150 years to get the job. It was a big hullabaloo, as my grandma would have said. And people were quoted in the newspaper saying, she's not qualified. It was for really good reasons. I was a woman. I was young.
And you're a woman.
Still a woman, yeah. Uh-huh. I was 45 years old. I was too young. I came out of the public sector. I'd been chief of staff to the mayor then. And I'm a Democrat, which were devastating reasons to run a chamber of commerce. So the people who hired me were like 13 people of who's who in the business community, all former chairs of the chamber, one woman and 12 men. And they brought me in after the newspaper articles and people saying bad things about Kelly Brough. And they're like, hey, what should we do? And I said, well, I think I should meet with these people who've never met me. They don't know me, but they're judging from my history that I'm not capable of doing the job. And two of the men said, we'll go with you. And often as a woman, we'll be like, that's very paternalistic. I don't need, I treated it more like childbirth. If you can help, you should come in. And so,
Most men can't help it.
and listen, I had made a huge jump in my career. I wasn't sure I could do this job. You know, I sold them on it. I was kind of starting to believe it. People said bad things, so I'm a little nervous. So these two guys go with me to the first meeting. You know, the mean guy who said bad things about me is sitting on that side, my two bodyguards on this side. And the guy says, you have to defend why you got this job. And I said, I'm not doing that. I came today to talk to you about what your organization does, what we do, and I think we could work together. He is completely like, you know, whatever. He's totally not interested. But I start sharing anyway. And by the third idea, he said, oh my gosh, I think we could make money doing that. And I said, I think we could too. Why don't you think about it? And if you're interested, you reach out and we'll work together. My two guys get up with me. We go down on the street and they say to me, you got this. You know exactly what you're doing. I highlight it because they did some things that didn't occur to me until after. They never spoke for me. They didn't take my voice away from me. They sent a message. These two men, by the way, had never worked with me. They had no idea if I could do this job. They sat right there basically saying, we choose her. We back her. We're some of the most powerful men in the business community in this region, and we picked her. Now, I'm sure they're thinking the whole time, please let us be right. And then when we got on the street, they gave me all my confidence back. I can do this. I do know how to navigate this world. I can find a path forward. It was such a powerful moment for me to be transformed to, it was my first CEO job. I can be a CEO.
Yeah.
It was amazing. And I'm grateful to those two men to this day, what they did.
Yeah. Excellent. Kate.
Wow. I'm sitting here wishing that you had been elected because I just,
Oh, I think we all know what's in her future.
Okay, good. I wish I could vote for you here. I wish I lived in the state. Is that, no, your humor and transparency is so great. So I think for me, you know, which is sometimes often true, like one of the hardest things I went through in my life is also one of the best things that's happened to me in my life. And I think because they force times of significant growth. So in being in the field that I'm in, you know, sort of the stem cell and gene therapy space, there are often times you can kind of intersect on occasion with people that may not believe in science or may believe that science challenges their version of their belief in God or higher power in some way. And I think what happens is like, if, for example, we're changing a genetic line or fixing an issue, there's a woman in Sacramento who does in utero surgeries, and she can change things genetically so a child is born without a genetic issue. And people have tried to kill her. People have felt like she's playing God, has felt like she's had, you know, changing things that should not be. And there was a time in my life where I sort of ran into that same line and trajectory that happened for me. And I ended up in, 4 congressional investigations in Congress federally, and having to defend a lot of things around science that I would have never imagined I was A, capable of doing, or B, thought it would for sure kill me. And it's amazing when you get through something that you think will kill you, that you're just like, wow, I lived through that and I'm 10 times stronger for it. But I think what I learned in that time point, a big lesson that I've stayed with, is that I would meet with people on the Hill in DC that were like my biggest cheerleaders. And it would be like meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting. This person. They're all like, yay, we love you. You're so amazing. This is so great. And my sister who works in politics, at the end of the night, I'd come back and I'd see her and she'd be like looking at all the cards I've had. And she's like, all these people love what you're doing. Why are you just meeting with these people? You should be meeting with all the people who don't love what you're doing. You should be leaning into all of the tough conversations, because that's where change happens. And immediately we pivoted to me doing interviews with publications that totally were not in my camp, to meeting with politicians who absolutely thought what we were doing was witch magic, just to everything that was going on. I was like, those are the meetings that I need to be in. Because that's where I can actually make a difference. And if I know it, I can get through that, then that's where the change really takes place. And living through that whole experience for me shifted my life in a drastic way. because I realized that like, I don't need sort of that. And yes, when you're feeling beat up, you need more cheerleaders for sure. But it's like, if all I get is cheerleaders, I'm sort of in the sounding basis back to me.
Yeah.
You know, and I need to be in front of people who are like, I completely disagree with what you're doing, and this is why. And I'm like, let's have a conversation about that.
Yes.
Let's talk about what that impact means long term to society, to the economy, to healthcare, and that I'm capable of leaning into that, which I didn't realize I was.
Yeah. And I think we all have to think about that. We use the phrase, you need to get unconventional sources of input. We all tend to talk to the same people over and over. They sit by you, what have you. But to call somebody who you don't really connect with and get a perspective is really powerful. To talk to the customer you lost, not the customer you won, gives you a really different perspective, and it's hard to do. So true. Yeah. So we just have 2 minutes before we am I right on the time, before we turn to questions? So just one last thought before we open it to the floor on if there's one thing you'd have somebody think about today that you wish somebody had told you 20 years ago. What's that one piece of advice to just punch out of your head and think a little differently? Let's start with Cate this time.
Yeah, I think, you know, especially as women, I think that, you know, our fear of failure, it can be really high. And not to say that our male colleagues obviously have fear of failure too, but I think that our fear of failure can sometimes be exceedingly high at times. But I think, as you've heard from everyone on the stage today, failing is an important part of growth. Failing is where we learn what didn't work. And I think is that, you know, I would just challenge anyone listening in, anyone here today to really think about how you can lean into that. What is the thing you're most afraid of failing at? What if you talked about it out loud? What would happen? You know, would people show up for you and support you differently? Would you meet someone who's like, oh, I have someone who's been through that. You know, maybe I'll make this introduction. But I would say, like, to lean into that space that you feel you're most afraid of failing in.
Yeah, great. Kelly?
I love that. I actually got this advice. My mom shared it with me, but it is still the number one advice I give out. My mom was really clear on the distinction between loss and regret. Loss is you tried to get the job, Antoinette didn't hire you, you go out to drink with your friends, you trash talk her, and you feel better, like in a week or so, right? But you get over loss, was my mom's point. Regret, you'll always wonder if you should have tried. And you cannot do anything to lessen regrets. So live your life with no regrets. Go for the things you want, recognizing loss is always manageable.
Yeah, excellent, great. Patti?
Well, I'm going to second a little bit about the keep failing and not be afraid to fail, because I think that's what limits all of us. But what I want to add to that is be creative. You know, think more, especially if so many people here, I'm sure, work in R&D and really work a lot with products that are going out to users. Just keep connecting and keep thinking about how you can create and maybe do something that might be a failure. Because you have to really, your chance to fail is because you've done something creative, you've gotten a new idea, you're taking something you've learned. So I think keep striving for that.
Yeah, thank you. And I have to say, one of the things I get excited about, because I'm the CEO, I got to pick the panel. Is this just amazing what these women are bringing here? So thank you for that. And now I'm going to turn it to Lucy, who's going to help facilitate our Q&A.
All right. Thank you, Antoinette. And thank you to our panelists for such a thoughtful and candid reflections. We're now going to open it up for Q&A. Just a couple of comments before we get started. Whether you're joining us here live in person or online, LinkedIn Live, this is an opportunity to ask questions, share perspectives, and build on what you have heard today. If you are in the room, you can raise your hand and we will have one of our mic runners bring a microphone to you. If you are joining us online, please use the Q&A or comments section in the LinkedIn Live feature, and we will have our team over there in the far corner monitoring those questions, and we'll be asking those here as well. So we'll be alternating between our live audience and LinkedIn. to make sure we have a wide range of voices. With that, I will kick it off here and take our first question here in the room.
Nothing.
Kelly, you have an amazing sense of humor, and that goes a long way. So thank you for injecting that. One of the things that leaders is you're trying to manage your own dysfunctional behaviors, which is anger, frustration. I'm sure there are a lot more stress. So how have you used humor to manage some of those dysfunctional behaviors? And maybe there are other ways to manage those behaviors for yourself, because people are watching you all the time. So appreciate.
I'm so sympathetic to your challenge. I actually have no dysfunctional behaviors, so there's not a lot I have to manage. I think my teams would say I probably laugh at myself more than anything else, and I do it in ways where I call it out very clearly of, that was just hilarious what I just did, and I promised myself I was going to stop doing it. Patience. I am not, one of the biggest issues I have is I'm like, hey, what's the point? Like, make the point. And I'm not really good at the lead up and the introduction and the, are your kids good? I'm just like, make the point and let's keep going. And I work hard. I hire people who are like, slow down, Kelly. We're going to listen to this. We're going to celebrate successes. And so I just make fun of myself when I do it. And I'm like, well, there I go again. Let's back up, please. How's your day going? But laughing at myself is probably.
No. We have a question up here, Anne. Yeah.
Thank you. This has been fabulous. Thank you so much. Very inspirational, very thoughtful. I'm a little curious about your villages. I heard you mention your sister. Mm-hmm. And I noticed that villages change over time and sort of how you have leaned in on them and what they look like and how they have changed over time.
It's a great question. Yeah, it's interesting. So just to speak of my sister, like growing up, we weren't that close. We were 18 months apart. So we were like constantly fighting. And we had like the same friend group, which was dangerous. So I feel like we've gotten so much closer later in our lives. But that speaks to kind of how I look at villages and community today. I surround myself with people that I feel like are in some state of sort of constant growth. It's a real commonality amongst my friendships, the leaders that I'm involved with. I was involved with Visage for many years for CEOs and EO. Just did a huge event in Denver not too long ago that I was a part of. But these like societal groups that help push us in a space that where people that show up to them are there to grow. I think for me, I may have friends that are, been in relationships 30 years that I'm so close with today. But I also feel that in my community circle, if I were to call like an old friend of mine that I've been friends with for 30 years and say, this is what I'm struggling today in our company that's doing X, Y, Z, they might be like, wow, that sounds tough. It's a lot of sympathy, right? I think in Dare to Lead, but like a lot of sympathy. Oh, that sounds so stressful going through the congressional, like awful. I don't know how this. Actually, that doesn't help me as much as I think other things do. So for me, I feel like sympathy as opposed to empathy, right? And sort of talking about this and being able to say, like, not maybe that none of these people on stage have even maybe are dealing with the issue that I might be dealing with, but are capable of saying, gosh, that must be really tough. But I absolutely know that you can get through it. And I know that collectively we can pull together to kind of resolve this. That is really helpful for me. And so my community has had to evolve in my life because of that, and I think that there's again, no regret or shame around that or anything. Is just that need to like seek out people, right? If you wanted to train for a marathon today and you've never done a marathon, should you hang out with a bunch of people that have never done a marathon? Probably not. Right? You want to go to people that have done it before, and you want to go to people that have maybe done a 5K or a 10K and a half marathon and be like, I'm going to start running with you, right? Because if you can do it, so can I. And I think that's how we elevate each other, which comes back to this space of like, I do a lot of mentorship with women in sort of STEM, right? There's such a sort of predominant space and lacking there for women involved in that. And I try to do as much mentorship with people starting companies, and it doesn't have to be, anything like my company, but it's like, I want to help mirror for them those gaps that they have within themselves that they're questioning, and to bring them up in that way too. So, yeah.
All right, thank you. We have a question from LinkedIn Live from Renee. What's a piece of advice from another woman that has stayed with you throughout your life?
I thought it was Brene Brown coming in on LinkedIn to ask this question.
I did too.
I was like, this is amazing.
I hope you've learned something, Brene.
That's right. That's
it. Piece of advice from another woman?
Yes.
The question?
Well, you quoted your
I can
mom
repeat
earlier.
it.
Yeah. So I already answered the question.
Yeah.
I'll throw one out that I know has been said, but that is an easy comment. A good friend of mine told me at the time. When I started my company, and people will ask me, what's the first thing you would tell yourself? And you've heard it already today, but hire to your weaknesses first, right? The first person I hired was the weakest part of who I was as a person. And that is who I needed to step in to help me, right? And if you have to know that first, of course, about yourself, but we all really know what a lot of our own weaknesses are. So if we're honest about that, but hiring to your weaknesses first, a good female CEO friend of mine had mentioned that right from the start, and that was extremely helpful for me.
I'll share something that Andrea Jung, who was the CEO of Avon for many years, and I first met her as a board member of GE. And when I became CEO here, we reconnected. And when you talk about your team, you inherit a lot of people, and you already have relationships with people. And she said, you may have a good team, but are they your team? Right? If you aren't clicking with someone, or you don't have that shared purpose, or they don't think your jokes are funny, right? No, but I think that has always resonated with me, because you need to be able to build. And if you aren't really playing on the same team, that makes a difference. And one thing, when I became CEO, we had all of our directors and above together. And I shared with people, I said, we intend to go in harm's way. We have a rough journey. It may not be what you signed up for. So you have a choice, but I want you to actively choose, do you want to be on the team? If you don't, there's no shame, but we will be running differently. And I think it was important because people had to reflect and decide, am I in? And if I'm in, I've got to be pulling pulling the oar in the boat, not just sitting there watching to see what happens. Patti, did you have a comment?
I guess the other thing I would say is just some advice that I got, or really some action that someone took, is one of our investors, a woman in Portland, really took the opportunity to bring all the women CEOs together, which was just recently. It really hadn't happened in Portland. And just especially bringing people in who had companies that were really selling. It wasn't the very, very early stage, but it was people who were in business. And I realized from that time, that felt great. I mean, I realized it's not something I had done in the last 10 years, but it was important to bring women together and get that same feeling of support, advice.
So true.
But you have to seek it out sometimes. It doesn't happen naturally. Everybody's so busy.
Yeah, you have to create the forums, environments like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
What else? I have one more question from LinkedIn Live. This question's from Alana from LinkedIn Live. Said that twice. All right. Have you ever encountered situations where strong leadership from women can be perceived as threatening by others in the organization? How have you navigated those dynamics while maintaining your leadership voice and building supportive relationships?
Have you ever not?
I know. Yeah.
Okay, Kelly, you go first.
Well, this still happens. So I'll share a story of running for office. I ran for mayor of Denver. Yes, I'm the loser. I actually came in second, is what I'm supposed to say.
Yes. So yeah.
So I got a silver medal. the interesting thing about that is you're on a stage for 6 months. I was probably on a stage 2 times a day for 6 months. There's nothing about me that the world doesn't know. But what really stood out is I'm on a stage with a man who's running for office as well. Every single time I walked off that stage, I got feedback on my physical appearance or on your style. That's exhausting, even if you think it's complimentary. I'm not running because I look good when I wear my glasses, you know, or I don't look good when I wear my glasses. And it starts, I think this is the same issue of, you know, if I was really assertive, people called me something else versus, wow, he really knows his stuff, you know, he has a lot of confidence. This we have completely not fixed in our society. And I would just say, I was sitting in a room the other day with a woman who works in construction, still an industry that is primarily male dominated. We were with a colleague of hers and it came up, how often do you have an idea in your team meeting that it's not heard until the dude says it? And he was flabbergasted that she and I were talking about this still being a reality. I would just say this is a real issue. And it's not just about us being too assertive, being called names. It's also about people can't hear us. They're not looking at us, you know, they're looking at us saying, when you hire the guy to run your company versus, wow, you've had incredible success and I want to invest. I think it's a huge ongoing issue.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think, you know, years ago, I felt like I would get like really upset about this when I would see this happen. I think sort of similar to what Kelly says, I don't really spend that much energy as much getting upset about it anymore. I know that like in some ways, I don't hold a lot of blame for people who find that as like like culturally, they were just brought up believing it. It's not something that like, you know, if they were brought up to believe that, it's just been a part of the culture. So how do we change the culture? How do we start to do this? I do think that as women, sometimes we can be really critical of each other, right? And I think that is something for us to look at, something that we can change around that. And by default, the other thing I will tell you that when I joined Visage, which is like I think it's probably 150-year-old now, but like 100-plus-year-old organization of CEOs. It used to be male only. I didn't know that. Yeah, used to be male only. And ultimately, when I joined it, and they had let women in, of course, but it had happened some time ago. But I had female CEOs of my friends of mine that were like, I kind of can't believe you're involved in Visage. Like, how many men are in the room with you in these groups? And I'm like, oh, it's 95% men. And then there's a few of us women in the room. And they're like, do you really feel comfortable in that environment? And I'm like, there's the key in this. I need to feel comfortable in that environment. That is the environment.
That is the environment.
That is it.
Changing that.
Right? And actually what was really fascinating was to be in that environment in a sort of a safer space of this group, but be able to challenge that when I would watch them be really hard on each other with a question and then get to me and give me a softball. I was like, no. Right? What you guys are doing in this is like pitching the softball to me. Like, go ahead and be this tough on me too, because that allows me to go into the world then and be tougher out in the world because people aren't going to throw me softballs like they did when you were on the stage, extra softball. You know, so that's what makes me stronger. That's what makes me stronger.
Well, and things won't change if you don't face it.
That's right.
You have to engage. The war's never going to be won if you stay on the sidelines.
That's right.
Patty, any comment?
Well, if you look at the statistics about women raising money, it's very discouraging.
It is.
I mean, they raised a fraction of what men raise. It's moved a little bit, but it's very difficult because to do a startup, you have to raise money. I mean, I think I've raised about $130 million over my career, and sometimes it was $25,000 at a time. And you know, I see how women lose in every one of those fundraising discussions. But the only way for it to change is you have to keep at it. And there are studies that have come out, like McKinsey did a study and showed that actually startups run by women were more successful. So that they were actually, there's facts that back up why you should invest in women, but still hasn't changed on enough.
Yeah. That's a low note. We need a high note.
Okay.
Do we have time for one more question, Lucy? Or
Yeah, we have time for one more. We have
I saw one
question
down
here in the room.
Oh, sorry.
Hi, my name is V. I'm a procurement analyst for the global sourcing teams for Terumo. So I have a question. First of all, I just want to say thank you for your insightful sharings. It was very motivating for me as a young professional woman. So I have a question that growing up, you were taught certain ways by the society, by family, by school. So what was one piece of advice that you got that you had to actually unlearn or disagree with to step up to your professional leadership career?
I was going to say, yeah. And V, thank you so much for mentioning your name and your role too. Appreciate that. And you know, you nailed on something that's been on my mind while we've been sitting here. So thank you for that. I think it's just as important to focus on what you need to unlearn as what you need to learn, right? So many of us come into this world with the tape, right? The tape that we plug in. Tape. God, even does anyone know? I'm going to give some.
Yeah. An 8-track.
Yeah. The 8-track. Yeah, we had 8 tracks in our living room. So is that they come in with a digital file that they're listening to, you know, and we have to unlearn those things. And, you know, a friend of mine who's just a CEO that just was seeing me when I was in White, we were talking about this. What are the top 3 things you want to unlearn this year? Make a list. And focus on them, because I think they're really, really key. You know, I think for me, just to answer your question more directly, you know, my mom was a female executive in the early 70s in a very male-dominated world, and she was very focused on, like, you have to do more than everyone else to prove your worth, to prove your capability. I have to unlearn what helped me get to where I am today, and hearing that from her as a child, I have to unlearn it in my life today, because otherwise I'll just run myself into the ground, right? So it served me well for a portion of my life, but it no longer does. Therefore, I need to focus on unlearning it. And I think that can be true for all those things that we have to unpack.
The first phrase joining GE was they formalized it. A woman has to work twice as hard as a man to be considered half as good. So you came in and you were told that day one. You have to unlearn that. Right? Kelly?
Yeah, I love this question. I feel like as I was coming up in my career, we were told tons of rules, like don't wear purple. By the way, some of these I'm sort of still baffled by.
Hey, look at Patti.
I know. I just
Have
want
you
to say
noticed her full suit, by the way? I love it.
Dangly earrings, you know,
Don't
sends
tell
a message
jokes.
about who you are, you know, and I just want to say it's not positive. It's like all these rules. You should wear suits, kind of emulate how men dress. You should, I feel like you have to challenge all of those rules, right? I grew up in the same society that everybody who asks me, you know, Kelly, who really will make decisions if you're the CEO? Well, I think it'll be me, you know? I grew up in the same environment that framed their view of women too, which means I carry some of that still. And we have to break free. And I think this is where you have to invite your teams to also identify when you're buying into something you were taught a very long time ago, not even realizing it. Because we don't see those things as clearly. And so one of the things I do with my HR is when I hire, I say to them, I want you to look for every single thing I do to say, that's either helping drive creativity or it's not. Or that's, you know, hurting women, that view, that subtle thing, the way you say it, using the term guys. I grew up in Montana. Guys is like not a gendered term, but it is. I had to unlearn using it, right? Things like that. I think it's a long list. I'm really depressed now.
Wait,
Patty, bring us home, Patty.
I want to talk about an upper, though.
Oh, good.
What makes these changes? What pushes back some of the things that you learned from your mother in some cases? You guys sound like you have mothers that were very helpful in that area. My mother was not, but is to be able to be around women like this, to be able to know Antoinette and see what she does. I mean, that is frankly one of the biggest change makers, at least for me, is to see other women doing this successfully that I can learn from.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we can do it, you know, anyone in here and anyone listening can as well. So please know that.
Yeah.
So true.
I'll close with a comment. Years ago, I was fortunate to meet George Lucas, the inventor of the Star Wars franchise. And he had, his new partner is a biomedical engineer, brilliant woman. And we just happened to be sitting at the same table. He said he's always asked about how he built these universes and all this stuff. He said, you cannot build something if you cannot imagine it. So if you are sitting, I grew up in this little town in the middle of nowhere. The only women I saw who controlled their lives were the nuns. So I'm like, oh, I better be a nun. Can't be a priest. But just think about that. If you don't see it, it doesn't even cross your mind. So I would just say, think big, imagine. I think we've heard a lot about creativity, innovation, leading with values, which is easy to say, but leading with values means owning the consequences, and facing those consequences is where you grow, right? So I want to thank our panel. I think we're out of time now, Lucy, right?
Yep.
So I just want to thank our panel, and I'll turn it over to Lucy to formally wrap up here.
All right. Thank you, Antoinette. And thank you, everyone, for those thoughtful questions. A huge thank you again to our panelists. I want to thank you for your openness, honesty, and leadership here today. Here are my key takeaways from what I heard. I'm going a little bit off script here. So, Kelly, thank you for sharing about turning your dyslexia into strength. And I took away, don't stay in your lane. I don't know if you meant it that way, but that's how I'm going to take it. Cate, thank you for sharing about reading and learning about the things that don't work out. Lean into that failure, and it's the most important part of growth. And Patti, having big goals, big, audacious, hairy goals. I love that phrase. And starting with what problem to solve when it comes to innovation. So thank you. I'm going to take that back to my day job. To everyone who joined us in the room and to those tuning in live around the world on LinkedIn, thank you for being a part of this conversation and for showing up to celebrate International Women's Day. For those of you here in the room, we invite you to stay for networking. This is a great opportunity to connect, continue the dialogue, and build relationships with one another. And to our virtual audience, thank you for spending your time with us today and for being a part of this global community. As we close out this panel, I want to leave us with this reminder. Empowering women isn't a moment or a single event. It is something we build every day through our actions, our advocacy, and how we show up for one another. Although today's event is coming to an end, the conversation doesn't stop. With that, we'll officially close today's panel. Thank you again, and happy International Women's Day.
You have the gifts. The gifts. We have gifts for them.
Oh, it's in our rooms.
Oh, okay. Let's